Yeah, a long way from a stuttering kid. I didn't get enough love.
Welcome to another episode of the How Men Cry podcast and or campaign. The How Men Cry campaign is simply focused on getting more men to talk about mental health and vulnerability. The current goal is to get 1,000 men to just share stories. And today we have a very special guest. I would do a drum roll. It makes musical sense. Yeah. But how are you today? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. Hey, I'm Rafe. I'm a special guest, I guess. I'm doing really well. I am so happy to be in Chicago, my hometown.
Yeah.
I lived away for a while, and it always feels like jumping into a warm bath when you come home.
Yeah, and it's good to have you back. Especially for anyone who doesn't know who you are. I think once we get into it, we'll know why that's even more special. Take this from me. So yeah, would you like to give the good listeners at home just an idea of who you are and what you do? And you can answer that however you want to.
Sure. So as Jordan or Dexter.
Or Dexter, whichever
Jordan
one.
Dexter,
My alter ego. People never know what to call me.
Man with several names goes. It says, I'm Rafe. I am the founder of So Far Sounds, which is how we met. I was at one of my gigs recently and was blown away by Dexter's performance. And really moved by what he had to say, both the mission and his persona. Your persona was incredible.
Thank you.
Backing up, I started something called So Far, which is basically short for Songs from a Room, and it was a movement 10 plus years ago just to help people lean in when hearing music, just to take away the background noise, tell people to put your drink down, focus, take your phone and put it away and just enjoy, take in the music. And it was just basically pop-up secret gigs that we did one, and we did two, and then after a while it took off because people were hungry for a chance to really listen and take it in. And they loved the idea of us in a small space, they're all intimate, where there were no distractions. It was just about the music, the art, in your case, the spoken word. And it grew, I think, because it resonated with people, from humble beginnings in a few living rooms in London, where I live now, to Chicago and about 500, almost 500 other cities around the world.
Yeah, which is just amazing. I was telling some buddies, it's like, whenever I travel or go anywhere, I usually do try to find the local So Far in that area, because it's so much easier, like, shameless plug, even from the artist standpoint of, there's so much energy and effort that goes into having to promote shows and even book out tours and other stuff like that. And just for a really convenient way to actually get your music heard. Because one thing I'll say in comparison to say if I just get booked out at a general venue sometimes, it's not as exactly what you mentioned about the amount of attention that goes towards the performances. Yes. I think because it's different, more people tend to follow along or tend to hang on longer to your actual content or performance. When that's kind of what I find. And I think it starts because they're probably paying more attention than if you're just in a loud random bar trying to win over some people. So yeah, we all the artists involved in that participate, we really appreciate it. So
Thank
it's
you.
Something awesome that you created.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That means a lot. That's why we do it. That's why we keep doing what we do.
Yeah, it's really awesome. And shout out to the Chicago So Far family as well.
Chicago!
They're always giving love, and I know a lot of artists that play within those circuits. So yeah. So could you just chat a bit more about how you grew up, and maybe what do you think pushed you into the pathway that you have now?
Sure. So I'm going to be a little more personal than normally because of the topic of the podcast.
Sure.
I was born on the south side of Chicago, and for anyone who's been there or lived there, it is a beautiful place, also a tough place.
Yeah.
And after sort of a challenging upbringing physically and just feeling a little bit on edge, my parents up and moved when I was a teenager to the north side, the suburbs, which I found boring in comparison. Too quiet, but a little more tranquil.
Yeah.
And along those years, I lost my mother. She died at 36.
My condolences.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was 12. And, you talk about how men cry and vulnerability, there's nothing more, nothing I can think of more difficult than losing a parent when you really shouldn't be.
Yeah.
So,
especially, young.
Yeah, so that really affected me. But at the same time, music was really good for my soul. You grew up in the South Side, and let's say Muddy Waters, Sam Cooke.
Yeah.
A lot of legends were either born there or played there over the years, and I just fell in love with Chicago music, and ultimately any music that fed my soul.
Yeah.
And it was a way to heal as well. And then in teenager, like so many other, I guess, kids, I got into rock and hard rock and heavy metal and soul, of course, and just a bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always somebody who just, when I saw a problem, I thought, well, there's something wrong, how can we solve it?
Yeah.
And we talked earlier about so far, I was solving a problem of going to gigs like you said, where people talked in text and everything. So it was a combination of just loving music and wanting to make things a bit better for musicians.
Yeah.
Who made me feel good all the time, whether I was suffering, we all suffer through tragedies in our life, or whether it was just for a good time.
Yeah. Now, and was that more, so were you ever, and forgive me for not knowing in case you put out the crazy heavy metal band, but were you ever a producer or performer of music, or just, were you on the other side of just appreciating and helping to,
Just a fan.
Just a fan.
Just a fan.
I didn't,
That's all I am. I mean, I can sing, but not well.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was being on the receiving end of everything.
Yeah.
And the final piece of my story is I left Chicago and bopped around for different jobs and careers, New York, LA, Atlanta, and then London, where I kind of settled and brought up a family.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I met and enjoyed different music communities.
Yeah.
Because each of those are beautiful cities in their own way musically.
Yeah.
And eventually worked for big companies and started my own business when I was in my 40s.
Yeah, nice. That's really awesome. That's really awesome, and it's also I've jumped around a bit as well, just like Lifewise. Did Seattle at some point. My sister's up in Brooklyn. I'm from the DC area originally, living here. So that's kind of been I've had a similar experience of like witnessing just how different and also connected cities are in terms of music. And then what's kind of crazy now is like artists that my sister will know or manage will pop up in Chicago or something, and I love that there's that type of overlap. And it's also cool just to kind of hear that even just having a love for it kind of kept you connected in a different way to a lot of those cities, because I feel like it's a very different experience when you get like sunk into especially the local music scenes of places, because there's so much character to it, and it's not just like the same mainstream production of things. So
think about anyone who's out there listening who's moved or is going to move. You're quite vulnerable when you go to a new city,
Absolutely.
Alone or with a partner, whatever.
Yeah.
You don't know where the post office is, where to buy bread.
Yeah.
But for me, the first two things I do is set up a stereo. Back in the day, you don't even need to do that now.
Yeah.
And then find out your local music venue. Because as soon as you go, you feel somehow better connected to what was going on. When I moved to Atlanta, there was a buzzy band who I hadn't heard of at the time called Outkast.
That's one of my favorites. That's funny.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Andre 3000. Big Boy always gets slept on, but Andre 3000's a magnificent writer. It's just insane.
Yeah. So my friend's like, a new band, newish. Let's go. I hadn't heard of him for some reason, and boom! I'm in this small place. Like, what is this? These guys are insane.
Yeah.
So I felt connected to Atlanta after that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And Atlanta scene, even now, I mean, music-wise, there's so much going on. That's always a great hub of it. So so circling back to even how you were saying you were brought up, do you feel like music has helped to be a coping mechanism, or just something to help to like dive into, even from like your own kind of healing journey?
Yeah, and I got it from my father, who loved classical music.
Nice.
And after a long day, he would just switch off and switch on and listen. And I'll never forget being 5 years old and needing him for something, and going into the living room where he was clearly in a zone, and him just telling me to be quiet, but asking me if I could wait.
Yeah.
Because he was taking it in, and afterwards he explained to me that music was there to be listened to.
Wow.
And he forbid us having it as background noise, like so many people do, like a party or any other event, because he's like, either it's quiet and I'm taking you in, or I'm taking the music in. And when the music is on, I want to pay respect to those musicians, even when he's just playing the stereo.
Yeah.
And so that lesson stuck with me for later in life.
Yeah.
Fast forward to when we had death in the family, and he went and he turned on the classical. He read poetry. He just showed me that that's how he was coping.
Yeah.
And so I took that on board.
Wow, that's really awesome, and I can definitely resonate with that because, believe it or not, like I used to stutter really bad as a kid, like almost not. I could barely form sentences a lot of times, and one of the things was like writing as well as music became outlets either for expression or for hearing. There's like a funny thing with the mind where actually performing in music, it kind of switches off the stutter for some reason. So there's a really great TED talk about it. I can't remember the person's name, but regardless. So just saying, there's that connection, and how we're able to resonate with music differently, and how it can be very moving for us. So
I didn't know that.
That's awesome.
That's pretty profound that you were able to get over that to the place where you perform in front of other people.
It took a pretty big turn, definitely. But I think some of that was from the space of not being able to let things out, that it became an outlet where, like a page is always going to listen to you, like there's no resistance to the page in that way. So I actually started writing spoken word and poetry first, switched into performing music for a long time, and I've since circled back and kind of realized the power within spoken word again, because it has that same effect. Like even out of so far sound shows, like why I've been performing How Men Cry so much through them is because I feel like those audiences really come to sink in and listen. And I think when they do, and it's like pin drop quiet sometimes. Like even through the performance, I remember thinking as I'm, performing, I was like, it is pin drop quiet in here. And it wasn't from a standpoint of, people not interacting, but I was like, they are really here, and that was really cool.
Is that more intimidating to you as an artist when you used to have all the clatter?
I think maybe sometimes. I think because of this particular content, it's really refreshing. I would say, it gives a nice refreshing look, because I know that people are really taking it in. But anyway, I want to dig into so fast forward, kind of life-wise, you had that like upbringing bringing you into now. So from working in just different environments, different industries, starting your own business, I know it can be a lot of pressure and a lot of stimulants pulling in a lot of ways, experiencing that loss early. How do you feel like you've cultivated a good, just like mental health space through all of that life transition to now?
So a couple things. First of all, going through something momentous when you're younger is terrible, but it also prepares you. And everything else, at least to me, was smaller. Whether it's just having one bad day, or having an issue at work, or a fight with your partner, whatever it is, the momentous earlier event, or for anyone who's had something more recently, puts things into perspective. Yeah. Because there's always that point that other people make, like other people have it worse, which other people always do. Someone else does. Yeah. But that sense of I had it worse. This is small, just helps you give it some perspective.
Sure.
The next thing is just surrounding yourself with positive people, positivity.
Yeah.
I used to say no toxic people.
Yeah.
You know, we all have that friend or those friends who, for some reason, they're negative, and you hang on to them out of legacy, out of history.
Yeah.
But I find that shedding some negative influences and people around you really helps for when the hard times come.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can look out and are with people who help build you up.
Yeah.
Or when you're with somebody who really listens and doesn't just talk at you, which again, we all have people in our lives who aren't particularly good listeners. So the second thing is surrounding yourself with the right people. I find writing is a really powerful thing too. Mm-hmm. From keeping a diary where you could just share things for yourself, like 3 things that make you feel good that day, or a story, or rewriting a poem that someone else wrote, or anything that catches you in life, and then you can go back on those words even, and that is like a tonic as well.
Yeah.
The final thing, because there's so many, is just walking.
Yeah,
right?
That's nice.
in any weather, just getting out by myself or with others and just wandering for hours.
When we first chatted today, that's what you were doing.
Yeah.
You were just walking around. Yeah.
And it's now proven that actually helps. Rocking or running helps put people into a better mental frame.
Yeah. And I was actually going to mention it. It's a couple of good books that I thought of when you mentioned that. One of them is The Body Keeps the Score, which is just like basically a really like dense, well-written book just about like processing deep traumas. And then there's another one called Forest Bathing, which actually talks about the act of just like going to walk and get around trees and other environments, like natural environments, and simple things like walking, bilateral stimulation, which is basically what you're doing when you're walking or running. And it's great that you that because I can resonate literally with all of those points differently. Definitely the walking. That's why I said it was kind of ironic, like before we rescheduled what we were doing to chat in this way, but I was literally maybe not even 5 or 10 minutes more north of you, walking around earlier. So that's pretty funny. So that's awesome. Have you ever struggled with any kind of like depression for any long periods of time, or do you feel like you've been able to mostly cultivate a pretty positive environment?
Yeah, I'm pretty positive. I think another thing that helped was the fact that my father, who I've spoken about earlier, was a psychiatrist.
Oh, well, that was probably a little convenient.
Right? So chatting with him, and also understanding that when you're starting to feel low and it's not going away, you need to seek help. And the help doesn't have to be from a paid medical person. It can be from anybody, but knowing that it's not okay to feel that way, and not to wallow and sit in it, but just go for it.
Yeah,
and so
that's awesome.
I've always been like that. Any medical issue, whether it's mental, which we're talking about now, or physical, you just gotta make it the priority in your life.
Yeah.
I'm gonna solve this until I feel better, whatever it is. And then once I identify it, then you're on the road to recovery.
Nice. Yeah, I love that, and that's great that you like had that early on to know, because that's something in particular for men that I think can be a very big struggle point. Is being able to, one, witness it, and then 2, to actually say, I'm going to seek that help.
Right.
So do you feel like you ever had to maybe combat any narratives around I guess how men in general are maybe socialized, or some of your environments being socialized, of having to like combat that within yourself, or do you think you've kind of been comfortable with that for the most part?
No, I think there's some big issues that connect to the name of this podcast.
Yeah.
After my mother died, I do not remember crying, and I swept it under the rug. I bottled it up, partially because I didn't think it was okay to cry as a male in our society. I thought it was deeply uncool.
Yeah.
I remember her funeral, not crying, and actually being told later by some of my schoolmates that they were surprised that I didn't show emotion.
Yeah.
And so,
Wow.
yeah, I bottled it up. And maybe once I can recollect doing it. And it was only years later, after realizing that that sort of forced happiness, or that piece of me wasn't let out, was damaging.
Yeah.
And so it was only later that I got that acceptance that it was totally okay, in fact necessary to cry.
Yeah.
And that was the only time I was able to fully cope with and deal with my mother's death.
Wow.
Which I had just bottled up and packed away somewhere.
Yeah, that's really, really powerful. And was it a certain circumstance that moved you to that, or was that kind of gradual, do you think?
Oh, I know exactly why. It was because I was struggling with my partner, who's still my partner, my wife, and my best friend,
Yeah.
a guy named, in England, a guy named Andy. He just looked at me and said, you need to find a way to maybe cope with some of the things that happened long ago, because they'll help you in your relationship. And so he just hit me at the right time, and I'm like, oh my God, you're right, I haven't really dealt with it.
Yeah.
The irony,
that's a big one too. I mean, I'm just thinking of that
please.
that loss that early. That's heavy.
and I didn't take it as big as it was.
Yeah.
And kind of thought, well, everyone's got problems. You know, I had mine. I'm moving on, which was probably not the right strategy. And then when I finally dealt with it in therapy, that then helped make everything around me better.
Yeah.
Read a bit of the Dalai Lama, and he's always said, be selfish and be happy, make yourself happy, and then you can radiate and heal others.
Yeah.
But if you've got something wrong with you, it's harder to be that way.
Yeah. Wow, so much wisdom in that. And I can directly resonate with it. Like, it's actually even some of the motivation behind this project, just, you know, to be candid, is from a lot of struggles, even within my own relationships, like, and within my own past, just from having difficulties connecting with people. If I'm just being frank, like, was able to do it very well, surface level, you know, and that type of interaction, but really with partners where you have to be vulnerable and in order for the relationship to work, you know, or you have to really sink in differently. I can definitely resonate that. Yeah, it doesn't, the ability to communicate about what you're really feeling and even expressing something that you know, may be struggling with, you know, which is like, hey, I've learned to respond to things in this way because I was hurt in that way. That, like, approaching something in that way is entirely different than that kind of bottled up approach. I'm glad you spoke on that, and also that you're mentioning that you've gone through that within therapy as well.
Yes.
That's really cool. And so much, I mean, I see it all the time, that it's very difficult for a lot of men to get to that place.
If ever.
Yeah, if ever. And I think that's almost a scarier one. Like, I've thought about it now, where I'm very happy that I've gotten to so many lessons now. It's been like a painful couple of years, but in comparison, I'm like, you know, I couldn't think of just what it would be like to continue in that pathway. Yeah. So. Yeah,
the archetype of strong male, you know, never cries, crying is weak. We've seen it with our ex-president. You know, it's all just I'm great.
Yeah.
That's the opposite of vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
And you know, that to me, that's not leadership. And I think to be the full package of a leader in our society, you have to come to grips with vulnerability.
Yeah.
Show a bit of it, not too much.
Yeah.
You know, there's too much as well.
Yeah.
But it's a fine line between being human, which means having pain, dealing with it, and being strong, which means showing that you can have that, but also move on and cope with it and function.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you relate to the word vulnerability within, you know, personal or professional? What does that word mean to you?
Vulnerability to me means showing the world that we are all equal. We're all on this planet together. We all suffer in some way at some time, on some days, sometimes worse than other, and by showing others that it opens them up to be more themselves.
Yeah.
And themselves are the full package, people who go through the ups and the downs of life and hopefully find some equilibrium. And so the reason it's so vital is it's, as I was saying before, the definition of leadership, it's the definition of our humanity. And when I'm around somebody who can show a little bit of it, I feel more at ease.
Yeah,
I can be myself.
Yeah, agree. And I love that definition, and I fully agree with it as well. And it is funny because at different points, I had looked at that word a lot differently, or maybe not even really considered it as being a potential option. But yeah, I appreciate that definition. And you're right. Like, I think out of most of my friend group now, it's so much more common. And I think even for a lot of the friends within this generation now, it's a lot more common. I would say for folks just say like, hey, I'm really struggling with this, or like, hey, I need help, or maybe it might be the environment that I've cultivated too. But that's probably more of it. But yeah, I love it. It's a lot of great jewels in this. So I have a couple more because I want to be time mindful. So this is kind of a two-part question that I like to ask in closing. And the first part of it is, what do you feel like the world could use more of from men?
From men?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we started to answer that, right?
Yeah.
Just to show a vulnerability.
Yeah.
To show the world that there are traits that are inherent in all humans, and men don't have a monopoly on either sharing certain things, that power, or not sharing certain things. And so I think that recognition, and we've been talking about for a while now, that there is vulnerability is so important. I also think, and this is all humans, the ability to listen and really take it in and not sit there listening while you think about what you're going to say next.
Yeah. Guilty. Working on that one.
And why?
In general. Not necessarily in general.
Yeah. So, amen. So why men? Well, men, again, have this archetype that they're supposed to come to the party knowing what to say, knowing what to do, being decisive, perhaps being the money earner, all those kinds of things, but not necessarily listen to direct others in sort of the most stereotypical way. And that's kind of nonsense. It's like everyone should be listened to, and men in particular don't have to have all the answers. That goes back to vulnerability. But if you can truly listen, then other people truly feel heard, that makes you a stronger male or just plain person and leader. So I think those are two things that come to mind the most. I'm sure there's a lot of other things, but to be honest, Dexter, I don't often think anymore in terms of genders. I think in terms of just humans. Yeah. And I think we all show characteristics that are male or female, or however you want to phrase it. Yeah. Or if you're not a male or a female today, again, it's the same thing. You still have certain traits. Yeah. That show your power and your humanity. Yeah. And I agree. And on that point, actually, I was just with my therapist having this conversation where I don't really like the terms like masculinity and femininity in general, because if you look up the definitions of them, it's like characteristics that are associated with being male, characteristics that are associated with, and it doesn't, that is still like an arbitrary definition. It really doesn't, that can be arranged, and I think we do ourselves a disservice. Like, I use an example of, if there's a father going to go pick up, his son or something like that to nurture the son, it's not this father tapping into a nurture or into his feminine side. Yeah. It's just a father nurturing a son, and that it can be the end of of the conversation. It doesn't have to turn into this
so I fully agree, because everybody, and I think that's part of what I want to show through a lot of these conversations as well too, is that there's no single man experience. There's no, we're all on spectrums in all types of ways. So I appreciate you stating that as well.
I'm taking a lot of learning from that. That's such a huge point. Masculinity, femininity, outdated perhaps. Let's move on.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think things have at times had utility to help the human mind better characterize, or just how I can understand why frameworks were created, but there's definitely just points of the more and more that we know about humans, and the more and more we know about the range of how people can be and the range of experiences that people have, I think it just becomes kind of a foolish game sometimes to keep trying to. We really love to put things in tidy boxes, and it just doesn't really work that well. There's very few really tidy, consistent boxes. So yeah, so maybe to flip that question a bit, is how do we get men in the world to get closer to maybe being able to express some of those things, express the vulnerability. Sometimes I frame it as, what can the world provide more to men? But I don't really like that statement always. People are like, you've had enough. But yeah, how do you think we all kind of get there? And I said, you don't have to even gender that for the convo. How do we as humanity get there?
I think it starts with the same place that so many important things start, and that's education. I think somebody my age might be open to change, but normally not so much. I think when you are soaking the world up like a sponge, and you're probably teenager, early teens, so old enough to really be thinking, have a tiny bit of life experience, not too old to be even close to being set in your ways, it's got to be priority in the school system. And that's to show through education who great leaders are, how they showed their humanity, how they blazed a path, whether it's in this country, Martin Luther King, or Abraham Lincoln, in the UK, where I'm at the moment, Winston Churchill, where was bravery shown in lots of different contexts, and then picking apart what that leadership was, so that, let's say, a 13-year-old can go, okay, I want to be more like them. And those great leaders showed some vulnerability. Those great leaders had dreams. Nelson Mandela is another one that comes to mind. And so I think by studying them at an early age, you take those things on board, and you have a more open view of the world as not vulnerability, but a slightly different topic around education. I'm involved with a charity called Facing History and Ourselves. And it basically teaches kids to have a more open view of the world, trying to eradicate racism, which is kind of impossible, but let's do something. So the point is, it starts by showing people through history what happened, whether it's in Rwanda or the Holocaust, and just how can we prevent that by being better citizens, by standing up to racism, hate, and by voting, and by all those things. It's a similar thing with your point about vulnerability. That actually, there are 13 million kids a year who are going through that program. How can we do the same thing through showing men, that there are other ways, and here's what it does for society.
No, I love that. That's awesome. And you have,
sorry for the long answer.
No, not at all. I mean, like I said, this is all great stuff. I really feel like there's just a lot of depth to it. And one more, I guess, final question, which I think you answered before, but just because I like to provide the opportunity, I normally would ask if you'd be comfortable sharing, a time that you've cried, and you did kind of like go into it more with your mother's passing and that realization. But are there any other moments or anything like that you can think of? It doesn't have to be tears of sadness. And maybe one other thing about that is I don't consider crying necessarily always just being with physical tears. You know, it can be in different means of crying out, healthy or unhealthy. So just to leave with
of course.
Yeah.
So I've already touched on things that I bottled up, but then I let go later in life, and certainly didn't cry around the recollection of my mother's death. But I think tears of joy are just as powerful, or tears of nostalgia. And so it's very easy as a parent to well up when your child moves on in life. Moving on means out of the house, and if they go into education, into college, moving into a dorm, that's a very profound moment. Or moving on as in dealing with their issues and crossing a threshold to healing themselves. And we've all seen it if we have kids or other people's kids or ourselves, but that point where somebody that you've nurtured in any way, and you've seen them sort of progress. So I certainly cried, taking children to school, 2 daughters, not gushing, but welling up for sure, and seeing them do well. You pat yourself on the back, but it's also quite emotional.
Yeah, that's awesome, and again, I appreciate you sharing that as well, because that's just that kind of rawness, and I think with this program and stuff too, as I've been mentioning, now I'm like, it's like every other day for me, man. I'm like reading or talk, like hearing different guys' stories or all these different moments that they look a lot different when you really kind of sink into just allowing that vulnerability and not fighting it so much.
Beautiful project.
So thank you, and I want to say thank you again just for taking the time, to come out and just have this whole conversation. I think there were a lot of beautiful moments through it, and again, thank you to the entire So Far team and organization for just showing up for artists differently, and helping folks to really put their passion and their art out in the world. So.
And what you're doing is needed, and I'm really thrilled to be part of it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Any final words you want to leave with the good folks at home?
Go support your neighborhood musicians, be it through So Far Sounds or whatever your favorite venue is. They're beautiful people, and art makes the world go round. Art is enduring. Art makes you cry. It's actually an acceptable way to shed some tears. So go get busy supporting, and if you need to get emotional there, by all means, that's great.
Love it. Thank you so much for that. And thank you everybody just for tuning in to the How Men Cry podcast. Again, you can find out more info at howmencry.com, How Men Cry IG, all that good stuff. But our mission is to just keep having conversations like this and continue to inspire them. So tune in next time, and go to a So Far Sound show. I might be performing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, sofarsounds.com, and then find your city.
Awesome.
Yeah, a long way from a stuttering kid. I didn't get